Good morning. I'm Daniel Smith. I'm President and CEO of Cooperative Network. It's my pleasure to welcome you today to our webinar. Developing a skilled workforce is one of the primary challenges cooperatives face. Minnesota has implemented a dual training pipeline to address current and future workforce needs in 4 major sectors: advanced manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare services, and information technology. To tell us more, it's my pleasure to introduce today Dan Solomon, a Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline Program Consultant with Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, who focuses on agriculture and advanced manufacturing. He has been in this role for the past 2.5 years. Prior to this role, Dan spent 6.5 years leading education and workforce training outreach for Senator Al Franken. So thank you and welcome, Dan.
Thanks so much, Dan, for having me, and to the Cooperative Network for hosting this event. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you all, and we'll pull up the slide deck and get going. There we are. So we'll jump right into the next slide. Just a little bit about Department of Labor and Industry for folks who maybe don't interact much with our state agency. We traditionally, when you think about DLI, we're the home to making sure that Minnesotans' work and living environments are equitable, healthy, and safe. And so we're the home to OSHA. We're the home to wage and hour compliance, workplace safety consultation, child labor laws, but we're also the home to registered apprenticeship. And registered apprenticeship has a long, nearly 100-year history in the state of Minnesota, in typically construction and the skilled trades. And that's where Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline really sort of comes out of it, borrows a lot of the same concepts and ideas that go along with registered apprenticeship. And so that's where a lot of our work comes from. We're also the home to Youth Skills Training Program, which I'll talk a little bit about later in this morning's presentation. And so if we'll head to the next slide. So what the heck is Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline? What are we all about? What's this work for? So really, Minnesota Dual Training Pipeline is a employment-based dual training program. So folks are either currently working for a company or they're being recruited to come work for a company, and then in this, they're going to be doing dual training. So on-the-job training paired with some formal education, and I'll talk more about that later. We work in 4 industries, as Dan said earlier: advanced manufacturing, agriculture, healthcare, and IT. Important to know for your members and everyone participating in this webinar. Obviously, there's a connection to ag, but also we recognize that everybody has IT needs these days, and so you don't have to exclusively be a Google or something like that to leverage this program for IT. And then we joke, but it's the truth. We wouldn't be a government program if pipeline wasn't actually also a giant acronym that stands for something. And so it believe it or not, stands for Private Investment, Public Education, Labor and Industry Experience. And I promise you won't be tested on that. But really, it sort of sums up the partnership and how this work gets interconnected and goes forward. If we'll go to the next slide, and we'll pull up the whole Venn diagram if you don't mind. Thank you. So there's just one more. We'll go. So it's all about that employment-based training. So folks either currently working for a company or about to be recruited and starting with a company. And then the dual training piece is structured on-the-job training paired with related instruction, so some formal education, and that related instruction is going to result in the completion of a degree, a certificate, or an industry recognized credential. And if we'll go to the next slide, there's really some significant benefits that we see in this work, both for the employer and the worker. So I'll start most importantly, because I imagine most of the folks who are on today's webinar are our employers. So the benefits that we see in the employers that we work with are, first of all, this model of dual training really puts the employer in the driver's seat. So they really get to design and build and shape your own workforce. You really get to just say immediately what's important for our folks to learn, and then hope to, through the work, to make sure that you're following up and training how you want your team and your staff to be trained. The other thing that's really crucial and really a great benefit is you're not waiting for somebody to complete a program before you can tap into them, because they're already working for you. So you're getting some productivity from them immediately. And then they're just enhancing their skills as they go forward. So you see a lot of improved productivity. And then the other two big benefits to this approach, this model, is one, on the recruitment side, this can be a great way to recruit new people to come work for your business or your organization, because it's a way to step in and say, hey, come work for me. You're going to earn a paycheck right away. We're going to train you on the job. We're going to show you a career pathway, how you can advance in this company or organization. And then also, whether it's through funding from the company itself or a state grant program that Minnesota has to offer, you're going to have little or no student debt. And so at a time where college debt in this country exceeds over $1 trillion, it's higher than credit card debt. That can be a pretty motivating factor to try to recruit people to come work for you. On the flip side, a lot of the companies we work with will tell us that they're seeing benefits in their retention, less employee turnover, and that happens for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, employees who go through a program like this really see that there's a benefit, there's a value to this work, that the company cares about them, that they value them as employees, that they're investing in them, they want them to succeed. That can be a really motivating factor. But then also, typically in a situation like this, through on-the-job training, you're going to have some sort of job shadowing and mentorship and coaching that goes on. And there's a lot of good information out there that the more relationships you have at work, the more likely you are to want to stay. So yes, you could maybe go across the street and make a quarter more an hour, but if I've got mentors at the company I'm at, if I've got friends at the company I'm at, why would I get up and leave when I'd also be leaving my friends and the people who care about me? And so that's a big benefit to helping reduce employee turnover as well. And then for the workers, the benefits are huge, right? It's an earn and learn model, so they're getting a paycheck right away while they're doing their training. Typically, there's some wage increases as they complete certain parts or aspects of their training. They're mastering these in-demand skills, and they're going to walk away with not only the job, most importantly, but also a degree, a certificate, or industry recognized credential that can really help them grow in their career. And so there's really benefits all the way around. If we go to the next slide, we do this work in sort of three big buckets in Minnesota. So first and foremost, we host industry forums throughout the year, at least 3 times a year, where we bring our 4 industries. Sometimes we meet with they're just the ag industry or just the manufacturing, et cetera. But then sometimes we'll bring all 4 industries together at the same time. And it's really an opportunity for us as a state program to learn from employers. What are your needs? What are your challenges? What are your successes, et cetera. But then also for us to really hear all also, in a pre-COVID time when people would get together, it was a really good way to network and exchange and learn from others and build those connections as well. We're trying to get creative in COVID as well as, heck, that's why we're on a webinar today, right? Instead of in person. But that's one of the benefits to the industry forums that we host throughout the year. We also convene competency councils throughout the year because this is a competency-based approach to training, and I'll talk more about that in a second. And then lastly, we do dual training consulting, which is just a fancy way of saying, I will go out and meet with any employer in the state of Minnesota who's interested in this work, wants to pursue it, and just might need some help or guidance or coaching or connection to other employers who are already doing it, et cetera, to be able to go forward in this work. We go to the next slide. So one of the things that's really crucial in all of this work is that we identify occupations that are in demand, and we work with employers to add those occupations and map out the competencies it takes to succeed in those occupations. And so for agriculture, I wanted to make sure you had the list of all the current ag occupations that we have listed. So, we've got ag equipment mechanic, agronomist, applicators, to try to cover the three big sort of farmer buckets. We have farm animal manager, traditional crop farm, your corn, soybean, et cetera, and then horticulture, fruit, vegetable, to sort of kind of encompass those farm manager titles. But then we also have grain merchandiser, which I know, a bunch of your members likely are in that role or work with folks in that role. We also have quality assurance, food safety, and then we worked with the pork industry in Minnesota a bit. So we have some swine positions, some swine tech positions. And so those are the ones that are currently identified for ag, but we're always interested in adding occupations. So we can go to the next slide. Might be a little bit hard to see, but I talked a little bit earlier about this being a competency-based approach to training. And that's really a key model and principle with pipeline. And so the thing to think about there when we talk about this being competency is it's really sort of turning what we traditionally have done with education in this country on its head, from the traditional, I go to school, I finish, I get this piece of paper, and then I start my career, to instead being a model where the competency driven, where it's really based on what do I really need to know to be successful in this occupation, and then mapping that out and hoping and working to make sure that I learn those things I need to know, I master those competencies. And so what you have on the screen now is for a horticulture farm manager. We have a pyramid like this that goes along with every one of the occupations that we have identified. And it lists the core competencies it takes to be successful in this job, but not only does it list them, it breaks it out based on what makes the most sense to be learned through the on-the-job training, what makes the most sense to be learned through the formal education, and then kind of a combination of the two. And so if you ever look at any of our pyramids, the top box, those occupation-specific competencies, those tend to be the things that somebody's going to learn through on-the-job training. The industry sector and industry-wide technical competencies tend to be the kind of things that somebody's going to learn through that formal education. And then workplace, academic, and personal effectiveness tend to be the things that people either come to the job with already, or they're going to see enhanced in all aspects of the training. And so when you put this all together, hopefully it serves as sort of a roadmap for training. It's important to know that we write these in a way to be purposely kind of broad and kind of general, because we also know that this may work for 90% of the tasks of a horticulture farm manager at your farm, but some of the things on here you might not do on your farm. That's okay. We would always say don't worry about that. And on the flip side, you may have some things that are really, really important that you want to make sure your people learn that we didn't list, and we would always say we welcome that, make that a part of your training, and add that. And so that's just something to note for all of our pyramids. And so if we go to the next slide, The other thing that we consider is that, you know, the list of occupations that we have is not intended to be like a stagnant, like some bureaucrat created it and we're never going to add any more occupations. We're always interested in adding occupations, and the way that we do that is we want to make sure that they meet a few set of standards. So first of all, you know, it's got to be an in-demand job. So we want to be hearing from at least a few employers who say they're having, you know, a hard time filling that occupation. And then we'll also back that with some labor market statistics from Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development. We want it to lead to a pathway to a livable wage. So in Minnesota, the state statistics based on a family, you know, one child, one full-time and one part-time employed adult, that'd be about $18.20 an hour. That doesn't mean they have to be earning that right away, but hopefully that they could be on a pathway to at least earning a wage right around that. Because we want these to be family sustaining jobs. It should lend itself to some sort of a career pathway. And then also, we believe a lot of these more and more jobs make sense for this dual training model, but there are some things that either there really isn't a formal education component to it, or on the flip side, sometimes in healthcare, there'll be issues where you can't do a job until you complete all of your education first. And so it's got to lend itself to this model. The last thing is it's got to be specific to the 4 industries that we work in. Every once in a while, the example I'll share is we'll get asked to add like an HR generalist. And unfortunately, we can't add that because as much as we recognize there's a need and a demand, it's not tailored enough to the specific 4 industries. It's too much of a job that the skills could kind of go into any industry. And so that's just one other factor that we consider. But we're always interested in adding occupations. If we go to the next slide. The other thing that we do is we keep on our website an inventory of educational opportunities that align to these occupations. So programs out there that we're aware of that would make sense to really pair well with this kind of job training. And so that's on our website. We keep that up to date. One of the things that's really important about Pipeline is for Minnesota companies who take advantage of it, you do not have to send your student employee to a Minnesota-based school. Obviously, you know, we like it when you do that, but you don't have to. It could be an online program. It could be, let's say you're, you know, on the border and you want to send somebody to North Dakota State, or on the flip side to, you know, UW Stout or River Falls or something like that. You could absolutely do that. So the education doesn't have to be a Minnesota-based institution. But this tool is a really kind of cool way to look up programs that go along with these jobs. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see sort of a screenshot of what the tool looks like. And so you just, you know, you go in there, look at industry, and then look up the job. And I think the next slide has even more of that sort of screenshot. So this is just for a machinist, for example. And it lists out all the programs, you know, whether it's online or not, credit-based, how long it should take, where the training institution is, all of that. One other thing that's really important to share is that we do our best to try to list as many of these programs that we find or learn about on our website. But I always tell employers, let's say you have a program that you want to send your employee to and it's not on our website. That does not mean that you can't use that program. All it means is we would just ask you, send us, you know, a link to that program. Let us check it out real quick. Make sure that it sort of meets the muster, and 9 times out of 10 it does. And then we would say, go ahead with that program, and we'll add it to our list. So we do our best to try to keep these up to date, but you know, as you can imagine, that sometimes it's impossible to get every program out there that's related to these things. But that's a resource on our website available for employers to look at. And then if we go to the next slide, we also offer have some tools on our website, you know, around specifically around on-the-job training. So some things to help folks really understand, some of the common methods for on-the-job training. So that's, typically mentoring or job shadowing, but it also could be discussion-based training. It could be sort of an assignment-based training, various different approaches. And so we've got some guidance and information about that. We also, some companies find it really helpful to really track the hours or the time spent doing this training. And so for every occupation that we have, we've got fillable spreadsheets that folks can click on and track that information as an employee would, or a set of employees would complete that training. And so that information is available as well. And we'll go to the next slide. There's also some funding available in Minnesota that goes along with this program. So Minnesota companies can apply for up to $150,000 to pay for up to $6,000 per employee to cover the cost of that employee's education. So it can pay for their tuition, their books, their fees, all of those kind of expenses. The application opens in the spring, so it'll open, in spring 2021. And one of the things that's really cool about it too is that an individual employee could actually get $6,000 a year for up to 4 years. So they could get up to $24,000 worth of their education paid for, as long as the company was willing to apply each year. There is a match required for larger companies. So if your company exceeds 25 million in revenue, there's a 25% match. But if you're under 25 million in revenue for the year, there's no match requirement. And one of the other things that's really cool about this program is that, especially I know because your organization, you're in both Minnesota and Wisconsin, if you don't even have to be a state resident to take advantage of this program. The only thing you have to do is you have to be working in Minnesota, because it's really intended to help Minnesota employers. So let's say, you've got folks, on the border who are coming over from Hudson or Eau Claire or something like that. As long as the work is happening in Minnesota, the Minnesota company could qualify for this program. And so that's just a little bit of information about the grant. If we go to the next page, it gives you just a little bit of insight of the scope of this. So since this grant has been around since 2015, there's been 217 awards made. There's going to be about 1,900 dual trainees who will have gotten and gone through this. The last round of funding that went out in June awarded over $2.7 million in funds to 49 different companies around the state. Most of the funds were admittedly in manufacturing, but there were a couple in ag, and over half of the money went to Greater Minnesota. So this is not exclusively just a Twin Cities metro-based kind of grant program. It by law in Minnesota, and also just by practice of the program, over half of this money has gone outside of the Twin Cities metro. And so that's just a little bit of information about the grant. So that's kind of a pipeline, and in a nutshell. I'll go on to U-Skills training, and then I'll be sure that we have some time at the end. I know we wanted to make some time for questions, and I can cover that as well. If anybody has other questions, I know, feel free to put it in the Q&A or in the chat. But we'll go forward, and I wanted to share a little bit of information about our U-Skills training initiative as well, because this is a pretty new program in Minnesota. But we're seeing a lot more interest in it. And so if we go to the next slide. So U-Skills training is all about trying to get 16 and 17-year-old student learners to get more interested and excited in these in-demand careers that very much are in the fields that we talked about with pipeline. And of course, agriculture is one of them. It's really all about how to, again, sort of similar to dual training pipeline, only tailored toward a high school student, They're going to do some classroom instruction to learn the skills. And then they're going to have a paid internship, a paid work experience in, that's really meaningful and has some on-the-job training at employer sites. So if we go to the next slide, here's just, some of the requirements. One of the things I'll just back up and say is that, so youth skills training operates in all four of the same industries as Pipeline. So ag, healthcare, advanced manufacturing, IT, but then also automotive. And so that is one other thing to be mindful of. So that's, kind of an exciting thing. The way, and Minnesota has supported this program for a couple of different ways. There are state grant funds available that local partnerships apply for. And so a local partnership is made up of at least one education provider, so and one employer, although most of the partnerships have, multiple employers and sometimes even multiple schools. And then they really come together to create these opportunities for high school students. The program has to have some instruction for the high school student where they're getting high school credit. They could be getting college credit at the same time, although they don't have to. The work experience has to be paid. The employer doesn't only has to pay minimum wage. I mean, obviously they could pay more than minimum wage, but they have some qualified supervision and safety training for the students. And at least 80% of the eligible students have to graduate, and at least 60% of students must receive some industry credentials. So that could be an OSHA 10, that could be a variety of different, credentials, but something that even as a high school student they can add and take with them. So we'll go to the next slide. Again, those are the four or the five industries that youth skills training works in. And if we go to the last slide, oh yeah, I'll get to this in a second. Yeah, so really youth skills training is all about creating those partnerships and those opportunities for businesses to come together, get these high school students that get their feet wet, get them initially kind of interested, excited in these in-demand occupations, and then hopefully, for employers, a potential workforce. So let's say you've got a student who does a high school internship, and it's a great experience. You could turn around, hire that student, and then ideally roll them right into the Pipeline program where they could get their education paid for. So these initiatives very much go hand in hand, but they're all about trying to really meet employers' workforce needs in a way that lets employers, again, be in the driver's seat, really identify what's important for them and how to achieve it. And so I wanted to just end briefly, because we are obviously in a time of COVID and everyone is being challenged and faced with that. On our website, we have resources for companies in case this is ever helpful to you, around COVID kind of related things. So worker protection handouts, OSHA handouts, preparedness plans for Minnesota companies, resource guides, all of that kind of stuff. And so that's available right on the main page of our website at dli.mn.gov/updates. And with that, we'll just go to the next one, and I'm happy to take questions if there are any questions from anyone participating this morning. Feel free to just enter it in the Q&A or in the chat.
Any questions then? If not, I'm sure we can, Dan will be, has provided his information there if you want to reach out to him directly. Thank you, Dan, for that presentation. It's a great example of a public-private partnership that really makes a difference in the countryside and with our cooperatives and in those different industries that you are working in. So really appreciate that information. This webinar will be available on our website. All that information there for contact people will be available. So please, if you do have questions, or if you know of other cooperatives which would be interested in speaking with Dan or learning more about this program, please reach out to them as well. Please mark September 22nd for our next webinar series from Cooperative Network, where Dr. Mike Boland of the University of Minnesota will be continuing the conversation of technology in the boardroom. With that, if there are no further questions, we'll let you get on with your day. Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for our participants today. And everyone stay well and be well.
Thanks so much for having me. Have a great rest of the day, everyone.
You're welcome.